has played a big role in the disinvestment, the ignoring, the reason why Black communities and other communities of color do view labor and unions unfavorably, the role of racism in policy. There's a lot of talk around it, including during the panel today, but no one is explicitly naming it. Instead, what I personally heard was a lot of people don't view things favorably, or they're communities that are underrepresented, communities that are ignored. They're naming the community, but they're not naming the actual root cause. And so that's what I found glaring to me over the last couple of days.
Yeah, and I agree with Kip, women, because one of the things that we see with Black is that a lot of the individuals who are involved or engaged with Black is women. And we don't have a women-centered conversation as well, because we don't think about all of the different ways of how women, we talk about exclusion. If you want to talk about erasure, talk about the voice of Black women or women, of color in the region. And you're so right, Amanda. Part of the conversation is even the government doesn't want to say Black. They'll say marginalized communities or things of that nature. But if we don't get to the point of naming and claiming, my question to you all is then how do we ensure that resources are going into communities that that people don't want to name? How do we ensure that the federal infrastructure, all of these delicious things that we had in this buffet, get to the communities that people really don't want to pinpoint and say Black communities, or they'll say communities of color sometimes, but the way of kind of getting around it is just the way that Amanda said. And so that's like one of these big rocks that we have to kind of push. And so how do we get to this point that if we're going to ensure that the resources through the federal infrastructure, how do we ensure that they come to communities that, as I said, that are not named? You feel free to come off chat, put it in the chat. I'd prefer that you come off chat because it's wonderful to hear your voice. Sound is so important.
May I add something, please?
Yes, ma'am.
I put in the chat, I am one of the women who broke into the coal mining industry back in the 70s. And we were led by Black women in doing that. I don't know how many people know that, but we have a national organization still of our sisters who are still alive. We've lost many. And our goal is to try and be a part of empowering young women and Black people, following the leadership of groups like BLAC. And I've been a supporter of your organization for quite a while and really value the work that you're doing. And I also am working with a group of women who broke into the building trades, who also are trying to do the same thing, because all of us went through lots of different kinds of difficulties getting jobs in those industries back then. And we want to be able to hand over to the young people the things that we learned along the way and our moral support as well. So I'm here with that kind of enthusiasm, and we'll be sharing what comes out of this discussion with my sisters in both of those arenas. And just mainly wanted to thank you. I think that a lot of people are going to go after building back better money now, or whatever it's called, money now. And there's a lot of groups that are working in this arena, but until the work is led by people with the experience that BLAC represents, we're going to have problems just duplicating a system that hasn't worked for the people. And so thank you. And I'm going to be quiet because I mainly want to listen.
Oh, thank you so much, Kip. And, thank you for the work that you have done and that you continue to do, because it's so vital and it's so critical. And appreciating you for bringing that into this space. Jordy, I see that that you're off of mute. Did you have something you wanted to share? If not, stay off mute and it's okay.
Oh, well, thank you for making such a welcoming space. I think I just never put myself back on mute. And I kind of felt like I already talked a lot, so I wanted to hang back from your question for another minute or two. I kind of have a Hermione Granger syndrome of hand up first to speak, so I'd like to hang back some.
All right, well, feel free to just hang back in. You don't have to hang back. You can hang forward, and it is so welcome in this space. And, I think Kip makes a very powerful point, and so does Amanda, in the fact of what's really in the context of the Black space, the absence of, and even if you have people in the space doing the work that are, Black led. Someone put in the chat earlier during the panel is like, yeah, but there's still this disparity there. There's this thing of, you may have the infrastructure to do something, but you don't have the resources, you don't have the knowledge. And so that positive question in my mind that I wrote is like, yeah, what happens when, and someone else mentioned about training up and scaling up. And my question is, if Black people are already so far behind and we kind of have to, come in on like the cavalry at high speed, and we're already tired. I'm just being honest, we're already tired. There's the harms and the hurts from everything that has gone on. It's the degenerative policy making that continues to kind of like land a hammer. It's not to say that we haven't made strides, because we have, but at the same time, we're still playing catch up. So when you have to come to a point of training up and scaling up and making people aware, my concern is, when we get to that place, will we be too late? Will we miss out? How do we get to this point where we can simultaneously do that? Yes, it's in coalition building. And I welcome you all to be a part of the work of BLAC. I welcome you to help, plan the strategy summit. I'd love for you, Kip, to talk about what you have done, and others, to lend your voice. But we have to wrestle with these things and the understanding that people of color and Black people and even Native Americans, there's a certain need that's different. And we can't make everything cookie cutter. There's a different need because the lived experience is different. So how do we move this along? Even when they talk about the Farm Bill, people lift up the farmers, but do you know what else is inside of the Farm Bill? Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. Yes, SNAP. Food, that is correct. And so it's not to say we don't do anything for the farmers, but at the same time, in that agriculture bill, they put SNAP benefits, food benefits, part of the social safety net. And what helps communities that are living in adverse poverty or at the poverty line? The safety net benefits. So that's Medicaid, that's food. And these things these opportunities or these social safety net programs put money back into our communities. It ensures that children get, special needs assistance, and it plays into some of the educational resources that we don't talk about. But yet what happens is these things are policy-wise pitted against one another. So you can get one thing, but it's at this, at the stake of another thing. So again, for me, it's about wrestling with these questions with regards to, thank you for sharing that. Sophia says, my grandfather got awarded a posthumous, I didn't see the whole thing, for something with regards to some racism around food. And all of these things, we're still seeing Black people and people of color and poor people continuing to be left out. Now we have this big thing here. How do we move all of these things simultaneously? How do we connect the train so that, because at the end of the day, how many people really will care about the infrastructure or the IRA if I have to eat? Yes, Amanda.
I just have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
And this is, it's kind of I don't know if it's an open question, but we talked a lot about community agreements. And I saw social justice mentioned, but I didn't see racial justice explicitly or anti-racism explicitly named. And so to your point, if people are serious about being intentional how can they actually create these agreements and create these initiatives if they're not explicitly saying we aim to be anti-racist in the coalition building and the work we're doing. And so, I mean, again, there's a lot of kind of dancing around with these broad sweeping general statements around, you know, what justice looks like, but they're not naming, we aim to be anti-racist in the work we're doing. We aim to specifically address racial justice, which encompasses environmental justice, which, if you're being intersectional, encompasses the impact on Black women, which all of this, of course, you know, impacts all the health concerns around, you know, everything everyone was talking about has a racial component to it. And I'm naming race specifically because of where we are and the focus, you know, of the group. Obviously, intersectionally, we want to be intersectional in the work, but there's just something I wanted to point out, that it would be great to see this group, the organizers and the people who are all here, really take that on and be intentional about including that language in the work they do, which would make them accountable to having to actually do that, which means having some uncomfortable conversations with different, quote, what we call stakeholders, and asking them to, hey, this is our stance on this and we want to work with you. So I just want to put that out there.
No, thank you for that. And that's why BLAC exists. Go ahead, Dana.
I was just saying, I really appreciate what you're saying, Amanda. And thing I would add, and I'll always take any criticism, but it's, when we talk about all these community benefit agreements that the DOE wants, and all the ways we want to include marginalized communities in these community benefit agreements, I just want to name that takes a lot of labor from the leaders of those communities to weigh in on these proposals. And I think given the volume of proposals we're going to see, that labor is going to become, those pressures are going to increase. And so I think what you're saying is important, Amanda, and I think it's also important to sort of acknowledge that the things that you just named, you know, being inclusive of folks in all this planning takes labor and time from the people you're including, right? And particularly from, you know, so when we look at environmental justice, you know, working in Charleston, West Virginia, you have the chemical industry, a lot of the Black community there in the NAACP in Charleston, West Virginia, not to speak for folks, they spend a ton of time working on basically first aid for people who are suffering horrible effects from being so close to the chemical industry. So I can imagine that when new projects are coming into Charleston, West Virginia, they're going to go to this NAACP group that's well established and has incredible organizers and is very expertise in the region and the issues. And they're all going to be asking the same three people, what do you think of my project? Can you approve it? Can you sign this? I don't know. I'm just imagining that it's going to become a big burden. And so how do we, I guess my question is, you know, how do we bring folks in the way they need to be, in a way that doesn't, you know, feel exploitative, that does honor the time that it takes to look at these things, to participate meaningfully in these processes, and that the communities we're asking to give that time are the ones that have it the least to give. If that makes sense.
If I may just quickly, just because it was a response to my comment, it's the same way that you all were talking about making these agreements and how people say, well, I don't have time to yada, yada, yada because of the urgency. It doesn't have to be on the Black people. Asking to put anti-racism in these statements means that anyone who is doing this work is accountable to making it anti-racist, which means that everyone else also needs to make themselves knowledgeable on how to be anti-racist. Yes, of course, you want to make sure that the people who are being most impacted, you know, that you're considering them and hearing their voices and not erasing their voices and working with Black, and all of the white people involved can also step up and understand what it means to be anti-racist and share and carry that labor load, so that those Black people who are front-facing aren't carrying it. so that they're literally just sharing and telling you what to do, and then you all do the work. And additionally, the people who typically don't show up, finding intentional ways to support them, whether it's giving them money to be there, making sure they have childcare, all the things that you would do for everybody else who doesn't show up, that is what you would do. So it doesn't have to be on them, to your point, right? We don't want to add more labor and work to them, which means that everybody else has to step up and carry that load so that they no longer have to kill themselves doing it. So that's my answer. You all already know the answer because you've been talking about it regarding, right, the false sense of urgency and skipping over the process to get to the end zone, right? It's the same exact thing.
Thank you. Jordy.
Yeah, I don't know that I'm directly responding to that set of comments, but yeah, I mean, I just want to say I appreciated what you said about the anti-racism, because for me, it like crystallized that, it crystallized for me that like the sort of the talk and the rhetoric about marginalized communities or oppression or inclusion, like I think maybe in the service of trying to be inclusive to lots of groups ends up seeming sort of wishy-washy towards any one of them. And so like in the American experience, from my perspective, like race is so central and like there's so much like the long shadow of whiteness's invisibility or white fragility is so powerful. Like we need to consciously break that. And so to say, for example, in the community benefits agreement, we're not just trying to reach marginalized communities, but we're specifically being anti-racist. Like that could be a really useful place to do that. And I'm just sort of saying this as a suggestion. Like in my own experience, sometimes I find like white people who are like more, inclined to think about these things, they get very antsy that like, oh no, if we bring up one particular kind of marginalized community, then what about the others? Like if we start talking about race, what about women? What about X? What about X? And it kind of creates this like scare. It's like another version in my mind of, and all this is like with big like asterisks, like these are just sort of half-formed thoughts, but like it brings up this fear of like, oh no, what if we have a we can't name any one lived experience of oppression or marginalization because we might leave somebody else out. And I'm like, that just seems weird to me. Like, why don't we just start talking about them, right? Like, what does being poor mean in this county or this town? What does being Black mean? What does being Hispanic mean? What does being LGBTQ? Like, we're much better off with like a symphony of many voices than trying to have the sort of, I just stumbled into this, the white noise of only one sound. I don't know if that makes sense, but like there's this effort to try and not seem like you're leaning towards any one kind of oppression by saying we're going to talk about all of them, but that doesn't actually help anyone understand what it means in a specific, in a specific context. I don't know if any of that helped, but that, for me at least, I wanted to thank you for like the anti-racism. That's one way to be like, we're going to talk about race now. Like that doesn't mean we're not going to talk about the other things. We're going to talk about how race affects this part of Appalachia or this county or this town or whatever.
But I also think it comes to a point to your point, Jordy, is first of all, when we start making our work more people-centered and humanizing, we get to see people as they are. We don't have to point out the color and all of that because we know the analysis. That's the issue. We know the analysis. We know the problem. What we have to identify is how do we come out of the problem, rather than keep having a certain subset of individuals being having access to it. Because I heard a lot of things today about access and talking about the worker, but again, I think it goes back to what Amanda is saying is like, in order to have something, in order for me to receive a benefit or to have access to something, you have to enunciate who I am. You have to enunciate that there are Black problems. You have to enunciate that Black people exist. And like you said, we have to be able to have the difficult conversations. If we are going to transition out, we've got to transcribe stuff truthfully. We have to be transparent. And yes, as Dana said, yeah, people are tired. But that still brings it back to right around to the question that I was asking. How do we simultaneously, and I think Black has to wrestle with this together with everybody, because there is this thing of like, who gets to carry the load and at what time? and who's missing from it to help. Why does every part of change for Black lives have to rest upon Black lives? And I believe that's what Amanda is saying. At some point in time, everybody who says that I am for you, then we need you to stand up and be for us and with us, and to speak up and to speak out. We need to come and drive solutions together, not for somebody to speak and tell my story, because I heard a lot about storytelling. But the whole issue is we're in this quagmire, and we're in this entanglement because people wanted to tell the story for Black people in the way that was comfortable for them and conducive, and built the vehicles that they needed to put, resources in the community. So there's a lot of things that we have to, chip away at. But until we can really get to a point of saying, yeah, we're here to do this work, and we're here to do this work because of this, we're always going to be there, because at the end of the day, none of these issues are separate. And that's the other part. None of these issues are separate. I say this all the time. We are in one fight with 50 different rounds, and different folks can come up and share in that round. It's like wrestling tag team. I see you, Sophia. It is that. And so we do have to wrestle if we're going to get to this point of the infrastructure, not just the community benefits plan, because they talked about more than that. How are these resources going to get in communities? And how is it going to help transition the communities? How are we going to ensure? What is the oversight and accountability we need to hold individuals to? We need to be in there. I believe it was one gentleman who said we need to bring ourselves to the table. I've been at the table. And I'll be honest with you, and I'll close with this, and I'll let Sophia go. I've been at the table and left the table crying, because when I asked the question of, well, what happens when you bring, how do we get to a point of bringing Black people in? How do we wrestle with when you don't want to name Black people? How do we get to the point of identifying solutions? And I'm told, well, we're still trying to figure that out. I'm told that that's a question that we're wrestling with. And then when you do your wrap up and your outcome, guess who's still missing from the wrap up and the outcome? So again, we have to be intentional. I can come to the table, but that's like you invited me to a party and I show up. You invite me, but I'm not welcome here. So how do we push and punch through that so that we are ensuring that we have a strategy in place, so that we are getting access and the opportunities, and our communities are getting those resources coming in there? Sophia. Yep, or you leave my name off the guest list. Come on, Amanda. Right, Sophia.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry, I was having some Wi-Fi issues, but reinforcing what you're saying. Oh, it looks like my thing is
That's okay.
Yeah, reinforcing what you're saying with regard to like the storytelling. Like my experience, I've done a lot of legislative work and gotten a lot of bills passed. And those of us who are Black and brown, who have had traditional experience of being systematically traumatized by, the systems, the colonial systems, the imperial systems in this country, we have the most impactful stories. Like I've mobilized like various people of color to legislative meetings, and we can get those staffers crying 2 weeks. Every time we get a solution. But when I'm in groups that are led by white people and they bring in white people talking about, oh, there are people out there who are, the most impacted by this, it has no impact. And so you need to be bringing us to the table to ensure that, we are having the impact that we can have, like maximize our impact, because I've seen it consistent.
I think
2
that's
weeks.
You're freezing up, Sophia. We just heard you say 2 weeks.
It's all it takes just to get one of those things, and
yeah. But you're right. And that's the part. And we have to be seen as credible messengers. We have to be seen as subject matter experts to our own lives. Welcome, Crystal. Crystal, Crystal has been engaged with Black since, I believe, our inception. She was part of one of our listening sessions. I always call her one of the co-founding, mothers after, the launch of. And Crystal has done she's from West Virginia. She's done great work and she continues to do great work. And she actually has a paper called Black by God that speaks to and educates and creates an awareness. And it's Black voices. And so, we have to look at again, and I believe she launched what she was doing because of the fact that the stories need to be told. They talked about telling the story of the worker. We don't necessarily have to look at that as a negative. We can tell the story of the worker and the fact that we need to quit just being the worker. We need to be the owner. We need to be the operator. We need to be the entrepreneur. We can shift that narrative. And that's part of what Black's work is about, is like how, as I said, how do we punch through the narrative and then grab hold of it to shift it and curate it in such a way that it is driving the change, speaking to the change and resonating with people to help us arrive at the change that we need. If I mess up your name, please forgive me. I believe it's Arafili or Arafili.
Arafili.
So would you please expound on what you wrote in the chat?
Sure. I am with an organization called RMI. It's a nationwide organization, and we are in this stage right now where we are trying to figure out how to support communities who have the additional burden now of applying for the funding that the federal programs have opened. So recognizing that the outcomes of those programs can benefit these communities, can be restorative opportunities for Black communities to thrive and have their communities remediated and get rid of the sites that are polluting their communities, all of that. But now have this additional burden on top of the work that they were already doing, that you all are already doing. Our question is like, how can we most be supportive of your communities in applying to that funding? Like Amanda was saying, like, how can we help you do the work? How can we do the work with you, not additionally burden you to take up these resources? So we have a proposal for how to do that and would love some feedback on it. Obviously, this is not the right forum. But yeah.
Oh, thank you. And I think that's a powerful question, because that is a question that many people are asking. When you get into the national spaces, when you get into, well, I'll say when I'm in a lot of the spaces that I'm in, what you constantly hear is like, where's the support? Where's the assistance? How do we do this? Because yeah, this is a great opportunity, a once in a lifetime opportunity that we know has an expiration date to it. However, some people don't know how to write a grant on the local level. They don't know how to do a budget on the local level. So how do we get them equipped and ready to do something that's more labor intensive on the federal level or even on the state level? And so I think, that becomes this thing of when we talk about awareness, what awareness do we bring and how do we do it? It's not just a community forum. There needs to be some teaching and some training. We can advocate and we can do all of those things, but how many people, and I think another question that comes to my mind again is how many people who are directly impacted? I'm a directly impacted person, which is why I'm in this work and I've been called to this work, but how many other directly impacted people are so devastatingly impacted? How do we get them to care? When the things that they have to care about is shoes and clothes and gas and food, just their activities of daily living. And how do we get the smaller organizations who are already suffering? How do we get those resources out to them? And so what it feels like is that, in strategizing about this, we have to answer the question of the how. We know what, but it's the how. How are we talking about it? How are we bringing resources there? How are we educating? How are we developing? Who is missing? And how do we get them in? How do we break that divide between the unions and the harm from the unions and getting people interested? And how do we bring, how does this benefit the woman with all the other attacks? And when we get to that point, how do we put all of this together so it benefits our community in enough time where we have an opportunity to get access to the resources? Amanda.
So I just wanted to say that that question is one that, that is a question that is posed to professional consultants. So I would really encourage your organization, if you need to get a grant and hire some really amazing Black women, queer-led consulting firms that do just that. They help organizations to understand how the decisions they make, their initiatives, their partnering, et cetera, is such that it's inclusive, it's sharing in power, and not putting additional burden on those who are already carrying those burdens. Because that is, what you're asking is something that people who, it's a consultant question. It's a very important question that every organization should center. It happens to be what I do, what my firm does. We help organizations with understanding their impact. There are equity impact tools and toolkits that are out there that people can look at. Collective impact, that framework and that understanding is one that also helps organizations to engage in work that is truly collective and in partnership with, so sharing power with, not power over, not patronizing, et cetera. So, I would really encourage you, and really any organization, regardless of who's leading it, to engage with experts who can really help you look at not just one-offs, but all the ways that you operate. But those are just some suggestions I would offer you.
That's an amazing point, Amanda. And just to say, get to the spirit of what we're trying to do, which is build wealth in Black communities, right? Pay people for the answers to the questions that we're asking them. So I would love to be in touch with you about maybe setting something up. Thank you.
Thank you. Kip.
May I please add what Amanda said to what the bishop has led us in, and start right here today. I don't know about the rest of you, but when I listened to the panel today, I got very uncomfortable, because there's a lot of words that get thrown around, but where are the people themselves leading in this particular endeavor that we're having today and tomorrow? So I hope that there's going to be a report back where everybody's going to hear these questions, people who have come together for these discussions here. And I'm going to another one this afternoon that Cornell is sponsoring. Again, everybody's talking about how to use the Build Back Better money. But where are the voices of the people that we're talking about here? Where are the Black voices, the Indigenous voices, the other people of color, the women, and people who are working with those communities? It's the same issue that we have in education right now. Everybody's telling us what we need to do in the schools, but where are the voices of the families of the Black kids and the poor kids leading in these discussions? And we're trying to do some of this in Pittsburgh right now. But on this, we have these the rest of today and tomorrow with ReImagine Appalachia. What a great time and place to just throw this question, these issues right out to people who say they care. And I think probably a lot of them do. But absent this, the discussion is not going to be what it should be.
Yeah. Well, I would say this, Kip. We open up and welcome those of you who are interested to be a part of BLAC, because we want to continue this conversation. We want to build upon this conversation, and we are building out an Appalachian agenda. We will be having Crystal put in the chat about, a policy summit that they'll be doing in Policy Day in West Virginia. And we will also be doing a policy summit. We did one last year. We'll be doing another one this year. Amani Reed was there, and she did a wonderful training on storytelling. What we want to do is to be able to build this coalition that is wrestling with these questions, but also identifying the solutions that it needs. And you're right, Amanda and Arafili, we need those consultants, but at the same time, all of us, we don't have those resources. When you think about, I can go after the same grant as someone else, and the white organization will get 200,000-300,000 and I'll get 50. So I've got to piecemeal together what's needed for us to get to what it is we need, unless we have volunteers. I will say this, again, ReImagine has and always, has been and is supportive of Black. Black actually, was birthed out of these the questions around these conversations. And so I think what we can see here is how, how something can be birthed out of something, and out of the need for something to be advanced even further, the conversation to go even deeper, but also this level of accountability, to say, look, sometimes we forget it, or we can just get set up in our structures so quickly that, sometimes people are absent from the conversation. Doesn't mean that good work isn't happening, because they're doing great work. And as I said, they support us. The need for us, for Black, was not just conversations around good union jobs. Black said, no, we have to advance this conversation. We understand that, yes, good paying union jobs is great, but those are not going to be accessible for everyone. Not everyone is going to have the skill set for it. Not everybody is going to have the education for it, because not everybody even has a high school diploma. So we got to also look at these barriers that are there, and not just talk, and not just say it's the union job, but we have to skill them up and scale them up and heal them up as well, in order to be able to go out and do what needs to be done. We have to, unfortunately, address a couple different fights at once, because who's on the front lines? Those that are traumatized, those that are hurting, those that are tired. It's women, it's young adults, it's Black people, it's people who have been harmed. And then what happens? The people come together in their trauma. So now we're organizing people in pain, and we have to figure out how to organize in our pain, out of our pain. How do we heal and build at the same time? How do we have healing justice, transformative justice, as well as this reparative justice to ourselves, because we've got to heal. So we can't just say that, these policies are only supposed to be there to put a monetary means, because if I'm not healthy, I can't get the job anyway. If I don't have access to the physician, I can't get the job anyway. If my community has been riddled with substance use, and I'm a former substance user, I can't, or I'm using, but I want to clean up, but I don't have access to a rehabilitation. I'm still left out. And so we have to think about all of these other barriers that's there, and what's the plan that moves us behind the barrier. And then if we take it a little further and a little deeper, the bottom line is, yes, this has an expiration date. And depending on what happens in 2024, how do we adapt and pivot? Because the one key word that they said, if nothing else, was legacy. We have to build for legacy. And we have to have a plan that helps us to adapt and pivot at the same time, while we're still trying to catch up. And so there's like these things that we need to have a deeper conversation about. I think the IRA is good, and the federal infrastructure, that's a start, but it's not deep enough. It doesn't go far enough for the communities who have been left out historically and perpetually. So again, I know we have to wrap up in 3 minutes. So I want to make space for everybody just to give like some last remarks. But I feel like, again, I invite you to be a part of BLAC. You can reach out to me at Hello BLAC, which is HELLOBLAC, at blackappalachiancoalition.com. I know the com and the org is we're working on it, Crystal, trying to get it fixed, but I wanted to, and then my other email is womenforchange@gmail.com. And our webpage is blackappalachiancoalition.org. You can go on there and see our story map. We also welcome individuals. If you have a story that you want to share, we ask that you please share your story, and we'll put it, with your permission, we'll put it on the map, because the map is going to be interactive. But from there, we want to create other opportunities so that it helps to build within our communities. You can follow us on Facebook and Twitter. I think Instagram, I'm not that social media savvy. So, but we do have those. And again, please, if you want to know more and you're in West Virginia, please, Crystal put in the website and the link, how you can subscribe to her newsletter. And you heard Amanda and, Arafili, and we're talking about, just the need for consultants. And Amanda and Arafili, I would love to have like a conversation and a bigger dialogue with the broader community on what roles does a consultant play? Because we don't think about that. We don't think about the different roles that people can play and how it can help us. So please, by all means, we just welcome you, because it has to be, if we're going to make monumental change in a monumental time, we need to build up some monumental solutions that are driven by us, for us. This is a legacy. When people talk about skin in the game, we've had skin in the game for a long time as Black and brown people, Native Americans. Everybody has had it. It just depends on what landed on your skin. But we can build a powerful coalition of voices. And we invite you to our listening sessions. And again, if you'd like to not only join, but be a part of our strategy summit, by all means, please let me know, because we are looking for individuals to help plan that and to be a part of it. So again, we have 6 minutes. And if there's anyone, I saw Dana put in there 12:55. So I open the floor to any last comments, concerns, questions, and suggestions. We'll have Willie and then Crystal, unless you want to say Crystal go first and Willie, but I saw the both of you come off mute and raise hands.
Go ahead, Crystal.
Thank you, Willie. So I just want to one of the challenges that I see in building Black by God, right, is how can Black by God be a thread, right, through community organizations. We know things are siloed. We know this, church group over here and NAACP. And so I've really been working to make a thread, but I feel as if one of the things that ReImagine Appalachia and Black Coalition could help support is, we're doing this policy work in West Virginia and we're just scrappy about it, right? We're just grassroots. Bishop Dinkins came last year and spoke with us, but I feel like there needs to be, like we're talking about consultants, like we need an admin for this type of thing. I don't know what to call it, right? But I feel like the work is not being connected. We're getting ready to have Black Policy Day, February 15th. We're working on things. So it's like, I don't know how we can thread things, but I'm feeling like, what's missing is that we just don't have capacity, right? We're just struggling to just like make this day happen and do webinars and do what we can. And how can we as Black Policy Day in West Virginia thread up through the Black Appalachian narrative and really just kind of be a more cohesive conversation. And I think that the solution is really just in, capacity, right? Like there has to be somebody dedicated to help do that. So that's sort of my need to this group, and also maybe offering a solution.
Willie.
I thought I'd just reflect on a couple of things. Thanks everybody for this conversation. This has been really good. Particularly the conversation a little earlier that kind of went back and forth a little bit between Dana and Amanda, I found really illuminating, and wanted to reflect a little bit from my experience as a white guy working in mostly white spaces. Sometimes when I see that a train has left the station and it's just all white people, then I'm like, okay, well, how do we rectify that? And even the experience of seeking guidance from Black folks and other people of color as to like, look, this shit is starting to happen. What do you need? Like, what will better, if even just asking for that guidance is like burdening them with like the labor of like directing something, in a inappropriate way. Sometimes it seems, and along the spectrum of like, I'm out of the blue asking for that guidance to I have a deep relationship with that person really affects those conversations are, which makes a lot of sense. I feel that sometimes or at least one time I can remember, I'm kind of unwittingly in this position where some big picture stuff is going to happen without even that wasn't on me, is going to happen without even an attempt to ask POC organizations what's up, and so then I'm like, well, I'll do it, and I was basically told off, like kind of rightly, honestly, but for like coming out of the blue, so that's just a challenge in my work that I'm reflecting on. The notion of having a consultant come to my organization, which is Appalachian Voices, and really look at our programmatic work and how can we be more responsive to the needs and the leadership of POC organizations. How can we be more anti-racist and stuff in our work is awesome. And I want to do that. And I want to talk to my management about that. We've done like DEI trainings, and that can be helpful as well, but particularly with like a bunch of liberal white people, that you can kind of get in this, like, everybody knows the right thing to say kind of thing. So like a consultant to really look at the work is an exciting thing to be thinking about. So those are just a couple reflections.
No, thank you for that. And I see we'll be leaving shortly, but I want to leave you all with one key word that Willie said: relationship. And Black is about building those relationships so that we can each be empowered, with one another, through one another. And as Crystal mentioned, lacing things together. How do we become this strong tapestry of solutions, or, that's driving solutions, so that we are meeting people where they are and bringing their voices to the center. And yes, Willie, I know it's